I was sitting in my room in front of my laptop, talking with my friends on a Zoom call. A minute was left for 2021. We all counted down as smiles spread on our faces. We thought that things would be better next year. Everyone did. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! All of us shouted out as the clock hit 12. The date, 32nd December. I thought it was a glitch with my phone. I checked my laptop to find the same date. Everyone's face on the call had a confused expression. Guys, I think there's a glitch on my devices, Gary said. Everyone repeated the same thing after him. All our devices had the same date. I turned on the TV, and in the corner of the screen was the same date. What is going on? I muttered to myself. The news channel was chaotic when I turned it on. Everyone was moving around the set of the local news channel as reports came in about the date. People in my street got out of their houses and raced back and forth to their neighbors' houses. A call came on my phone. Guys, I've got to go. I left the Zoom meeting and answered the call. Reports are now coming in from all over the town that the date is not 1st January 2021, but 32nd December 2020. I silenced the TV and answered the call. Blake, we need you here, a raspy voice said. Why? What's happened? Something. I can't tell you like this. Come to 24th Street. I tried to ask him further about the situation, but he ended the call. Not like I have a choice, I thought. I put on my uniform and headed to the address he gave me. There were 2 police cars and an ambulance parked outside of a house with tape surrounding the whole perimeter. What's happening? I asked an officer as I approached the house. Oh, Blake, ask him. He pointed to a man standing at the door, wearing a hat and a white trench coat. Drew, I called out to the man. What's going on? Blake. He turned around and took his hat off. I have no idea. Why'd you call me? I asked. Well, you see, it's hard to explain. Honestly, it's impossible to explain. Look there. He pointed to the ambulance. As it was closing its doors, I saw a man in there with a missing arm. See that man? Now come inside, he said as he walked towards the door. Inside, there was nothing. What's here? I asked. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's like no one even lives here, right? I nodded. Well then, come upstairs. I followed him up there. I felt like something was off here at this place. It just felt weird. Upstairs, there was furniture, a kid's room, and an attic with stored items. This is strange, I said. Drew stood still for a moment and gestured for me to follow him into the main bedroom. The room was neat, bed made, curtains pulled back. He walked over to the window and stared out. What exactly am I looking for? I asked. Tell me, Blake, what do you make of this situation? The missing arm? The 32nd December? I raised an eyebrow. I make of it that either something's gone terribly wrong with the world or you're being cryptic as always. What the heck indeed, Drew said after me. And that man you just saw riding away, you saw how his arm was cut off, right? Well, there are no remains of a cut-off arm here. I turned my head to him in confusion. What do you mean? Did you check properly? Thrice, in the whole neighborhood. I scratched my head in frustration. Well, how did his arm come off? Who cut it off? No one. Stop with the riddles and get to the point, I said, my patience wearing thin. This family was in the living room, he began, sitting down on the bed. They were celebrating New Year like everyone else. When the clock struck 12, everyone supposedly disappeared. What? I asked with furrowed brows. That man was standing outside the door with his arm inside, and as everything disappeared in the room, so did his arm. Are you serious? Because this doesn't make any sense. Well then, let me ask you this. Where is his arm? Drew asked, raising his voice slightly. And while you're at it, remember that it's 32nd December today, which is impossible. I had no words. There wasn't anything to say. Everything happening was utterly impossible. Blake, come in, my radio crackled with Jane's voice. What is it? Go to 19th Lane. I think you might want to see what happened there. I looked at Drew, and he nodded. We both got in his car and drove away. We reckoned riots would start soon, and people would definitely believe this was the end of the world. Drew thought otherwise. What makes you think it's not the end? I asked. It's hard to explain. I need you to trust me. It's not the end just yet. We arrived at the address Jane gave us. We went in, and just like before, there was nothing. I heard a loud bang from their house and went to make sure they were okay, but there was no one in there, the neighbor who found the house like this told us. "We have to stop this from going on the news," Drew said as we walked away from the house. "I don't think it will. We've only found 2 houses like this." "We have," Drew interrupted, "but we have to assume there are more like this across the town." I heard a ping from my phone. Pulling it out of my pocket, I saw a news article. "Well, you wouldn't be wrong," I said, showing it to Drew. The headline read, "Strange disappearances spotted in the town of..." Thankfully, it was a local article, so it probably hadn't reached people outside our town. "Well, great," Drew sighed, pulling out his phone to warn Jane about riots and to prepare teams to manage them. He was surprisingly right. Riots started an hour later as people raided stores, hoarding anything they could get their hands on. "How did you know riots would start?" I asked him. "That's a question for another day. Let me drop you home." "Aren't we going to the station to give the report?" "Ah, there's no need for that. No one's there at the moment," he said, dodging my question as always. After Drew dropped me off, I decided to sleep. I figured it wouldn't be long before he called me again. I woke up to blaring alarms and red and blue lights shining through my window. It was 12:43 p.m. I dressed quickly and stepped outside, only to find Drew already sitting at my table pouring himself a drink from the whiskey I'd kept in the fridge. "How the heck did you?" I stopped mid-sentence. He already knew what I was going to ask. "You left your window open," he said simply, finishing his drink. "Let's go." Once again, there was no one in the neighbor's house. Just like the previous night, everything and everyone had vanished. "What happened to the man who lost his arm?" I asked, remembering him. "He's nowhere to be found. Security says they didn't see anyone leave, and if he jumped out the window, he wouldn't have survived for long." I held my head in my hands, feeling overwhelmed. What on earth was happening? Why was this happening? There had to be an explanation or a way to stop it. "Breathe," Drew said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We'll put an end to this, just don't overthink it." After taking a moment to calm down, I asked, "Has this happened anywhere else?" "In the morning?" "Yes, 8 more places," he replied calmly. I stared at him, astonished at his composure. While I was sweating and panicking, he looked as serene as ever. "Hey, tell me, is there a pattern to these disappearances?" I asked. "Nope. As far as I know, they're completely random." "Then that means this could happen to us too?" "Precisely," I sighed. How could he say that so matter-of-factly and stay so calm? The rest of the day was spent at the station, reviewing reports of disappearances and riots from across the city. As always, I tried asking Drew how he knew so much about what was happening and why he stayed so calm. And, as always, his response was the same: "You'll know when the time comes." That night, as I prepared for bed, I checked the date again, 33rd December. I hoped I would wake up from this nightmare. I woke to a rumbling sound coming from within the walls. They were shaking violently. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I tried to get out of bed, but I couldn't. It was as though my weight had increased so much that my body couldn't handle it. My eyelids grew heavy, and I struggled to breathe. Wheezing for air, I eventually blacked out. The darkness lasted only a moment before I woke up again, this time lying on the ground in a white enclosure. "Hello there," a voice called out behind me. I turned to see a man sitting on a chair with his arms and legs crossed. He wore a navy suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. "Who are you?" I asked, scanning my surroundings. The room had no door or windows. "I'm the one you call God," he said. "What?" I stammered, unsure if I was hearing him correctly. "Let's get this over with. I have to answer some of your questions before you move on." "Ask away," he said briskly. "Move on where? Am I dead?" "You have 2 choices," he said, ignoring my second question. "Either become our slave for 1,000 years, or enter the shuffler. Your soul will be reshuffled, your identity torn apart, and a new one will be created." I raised my hand to ask something, but stopped. If this was truly God, I figured I needed to choose my questions carefully. After much thought, I asked, "What's happening on Earth? Why hasn't 2021 arrived?" A grin spread across his face. Finally, someone asks the right question. He snapped his fingers, and a board appeared. "There's a pandemic on Earth right now," he began. Strange symbols appeared on the board as he spoke. "Pandemics usually come every century. Each century, my higher-ups give me a year to harvest as much energy as possible without disturbing the balance of both our worlds. 2020 was one such year, but the deaths were far fewer than expected. So I extended December to meet the energy quota. I was dumbfounded. Your higher ups? Aren't you supposed to be the ultimate authority? I take orders like everyone else, he replied nonchalantly. And what do you mean by energy and your world? I asked. Our world relies on energy, which we extract from yours. Once, our world was in ruins because dark wizards hoarded energy for themselves. To save us, a wizard created your world. Deaths in your world provide the energy we need to survive. And you cause deaths how? Plagues, natural causes, organ failures, things like that, he said dismissively. Then how am I here? Am I dead? He looked embarrassed. To meet the quota, I had to use magic to pull people directly to this plane. It's not natural and it bends the rules, but it's effective. I was furious. He was killing people to fuel his own world. Well, he said, his voice booming, choose, servitude or the shuffler? Before I could answer, the ground beneath us began to glitch. The walls flickered in and out of existence. What's happening? I asked. Drew, he muttered, his composure cracking. You know Drew, don't you? How do you know him? I caught him once, years ago. He escaped. Lucky guy. I turned to see a door appear behind me. It looked exactly like my bedroom door. Stay, he shouted. You want answers about Drew? I'll tell you. Just don't go through that door. But his fear was evident. Whatever was behind that door terrified him. I made my choice. Crawling toward it, despite the force pulling me back, I opened the door and was blinded by a brilliant white light. I woke up in my bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. My heart raced as I scanned my surroundings. I checked the date, January 1st, 2021. It wasn't a dream. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Drew holding 2 cups of coffee. Mornin', he greeted cheerfully. I let him in and wasted no time. Have you ever been taken by God? For the first time, Drew looked caught off guard. After a moment, he composed himself. Yes, years ago. How did you come back? How did you? He countered. I recounted the glitching room and the door, and he was scared. Of you. Drew chuckled. You'll know why one day. Before I could ask more, Jane's voice came through the radio. Sir, I think you'll want to see this. Drew looked at me with a smile. Want to check it out? Absolutely, I replied. And with that, we were off again.